The chamber of the council was vast enough to dwarf entire cities, a dome of light and polished alloy where representatives of thousands of species gathered in an arrangement older than memory. Every movement was ritual, every word bound by tradition, and yet beneath the familiar cadence ran an unease that none dared name. The galaxy's most ancient powers prided themselves on certainty. They had catalogued the stars, bent entire worlds to law, and erased threats that once dared rise against them. But now a petition lay on the central dais, and with it a question they could not banish. The matter of Earth had forced itself into their carefully balanced order. The council's clerk, a being of crystalline lattice whose voice rang with perfect clarity, repeated the charge for the session: recognition of a new species, a people who had clawed their way from obscurity into galactic awareness within a fraction of an epoch. Many dismissed them as unrefined. Others whispered of a resilience that unsettled even hardened predators. Records showed that this world had endured famines, plagues, internal wars, and yet had not merely survived but advanced faster than precedent allowed. Their emissaries spoke with confidence that belied their relative youth. And now they requested not only recognition but admission, full standing among civilizations that had ruled the stars since before Earth had discovered fire. Murmurs rose from tier upon tier of delegates. Feathered voices, scaled hisses, metallic reverberations, all mixed into an uneasy tide. Some argued the newcomers were too dangerous, too volatile to be admitted. Others cautioned that exclusion might provoke the very dangers they feared. What gnawed at the chamber most was not the petition itself, but the formality it required. Every species, upon entry, revealed its ancestral designation, the oldest name that bound its history, its essence. The act was ceremonial, symbolic, but not without weight. Names carried echoes. To speak one aloud was to accept its truth into the council's record. The presiding chancellor, robed in silver filaments that shimmered with authority, raised one elongated hand to quell the discord. Silence spread reluctantly. The chancellor reminded them of procedure. No species could be judged until its name had been declared. And here lay the tension. Earth had delayed. For cycles they had negotiated, presented arguments, offered treaties, but withheld the final word. Until today. A sealed communication had arrived, to be opened in session. A hush settled over the tiers, more oppressive than any proclamation. Curiosity warred with dread, for instinct told them that this moment would not be ordinary. The council chamber, built to project confidence, seemed suddenly fragile. Light panels dimmed in subtle rhythm as if the structure itself felt the weight of expectation. Delegates leaned forward, sensory organs flaring, wings twitching, mandibles clicking. For the oldest races, it stirred memories long buried, an uncomfortable recognition that perhaps the galaxy did not know itself as completely as it believed. The youngest species, eager and naive, looked on with excitement, not understanding why the elders shifted uneasily. A messenger drone rose into the air, carrying the capsule that held Earth's submission. Its polished surface caught the glow of the chamber lights, scattering them into fractured rainbows across the council tiers. It drifted slowly to the chancellor's podium, where ceremonial protocol demanded the declaration be read aloud to all. The chancellor's voice did not waver, but the slightest delay in opening the capsule betrayed the same apprehension that infected the hall. With deliberate motion, the seal was broken, and the words were revealed to the assembly. What the delegates expected was a name as most understood them, perhaps poetic, perhaps technical, something tethered to soil or star. Instead, what they received was a name spoken in syllables that resonated with unsettling familiarity, though none could place why. The council did not yet know the meaning, but the cadence itself seemed to echo from somewhere beyond the reach of current memory, like a shadow cast by an unseen figure. Reactions flared instantly, feathers puffed, carapaces tightened, metallic voices hummed discordantly. Even before translation, the sound alone unsettled them. The chancellor announced that the human envoy, waiting in the wings, would step forward to confirm and contextualize the declaration. Though the envoy's features were hidden by the chamber's distance, their posture radiated calm certainty, the kind of poise found not in inexperience but in conviction. No flourish, no arrogance, only quiet assurance that what they carried was immovable truth. This stillness contrasted with the restless fidgeting of species who had sat on the council for millennia, and in that contrast the unease deepened. The envoy waited, not rushing the process, as if time itself bent toward them rather than the other way around. Delegates whispered of omens, of ancient prophecies spoken in their own archives, of forgotten warnings carved into ruins. None dared say it aloud, but a current of fear spread like a silent contagion, for every being present felt it. The threshold had been crossed. What had been myth, rumor, or ignorance now crystallized into reality. The council's illusion of control trembled. And in the silence between announcement and confirmation, the galaxy collectively held its breath, sensing that when the name was spoken, nothing would remain unchanged. The envoys stood in the circle of light, their presence drawing every gaze in the chamber. Without flourish or delay, the declaration was spoken with unyielding clarity. We are Earth. We are Terra. In the truest tongue, we are humanity. The words rippled outward, caught by thousands of translators and converted into sounds, pulses, and signals comprehensible to every mind present. Yet translation did not soften the weight. Something within the syllables struck deeper than language, as if the concept they carried resonated with the oldest parts of consciousness. For a breathless instant, the hall was motionless. Then reaction erupted. Predatory species whose kind had never bowed flinched instinctively, pupils narrowing, scales shivering in reflex. Herbivorous races recoiled, their sensory frills flattening in primal alarm. Even mechanical beings, supposedly beyond fear, pulsed error warnings across their neural webs, patterns echoing anomalies from records marked for deletion. The word did not merely identify, it invoked. Delegates whispered to each other with mounting urgency, repeating the name, testing its edges, only to find it lodged in memory with unsettling permanence. The human envoy's tone carried no arrogance, no apology. It was a simple confirmation, as if daring the galaxy to contest reality. Humanity endures. Humanity remembers. We are here to claim our place, nothing more, nothing less. The quiet confidence unsettled the chamber more than any display of force could have achieved. These were not beings begging for recognition, they were announcing what was inevitable. The council clerks scrambled, pulling data from archives long thought irrelevant. Cross-references began to trigger forbidden alerts. Old languages, predating current empires, contained fragments of the name. Inscriptions on ruined worlds spoke of wars that left no victors, only ashes. Faded records whispered of a species that had burned too brightly to be forgotten, yet had been erased deliberately, as though the galaxy itself had conspired to remove their trace. The recognition dawned slowly, but once glimpsed, it spread like wildfire. Delegates shifted from confusion to alarm. The connection could not be dismissed as coincidence. Across the tiers, silence fell again, heavier than before. Every species present understood that this was no simple naming. It was reclamation. The past, forcibly buried, had clawed its way back into the present. The word, humanity, was not new, it was old, older than many of the Council's longest-standing members dared admit. The envoy's calm only amplified the unease. By uttering the name without hesitation, they had reached across eons and forced recognition of a legacy thought destroyed. Some tried to laugh, to diminish the revelation as primitive bravado, but their attempts faltered against the palpable tension. Others whispered accusations that Earth had uncovered forbidden archives and stolen the name to wield as intimidation. Yet even these detractors spoke with unease, for their voices lacked conviction. Deep inside, every delegate felt the same disquiet. The name carried a rhythm that matched forgotten fears. The galaxy's predators, masters of countless hunting grounds, found themselves staring at one another, each unwilling to admit the unease now coiling in their stomachs. The Chancellor attempted to restore order, calling for composure, but the words rang hollow. Authority itself seemed diminished, as though the very architecture of power had tilted toward the envoy. The declaration had not required argument, negotiation, or persuasion. It had simply existed, undeniable, as though the galaxy had been waiting all along for it to be spoken aloud. What unsettled them most was not the threat of immediate war but the implication that their histories had lied. If humanity had once walked among them and been erased, what else lay hidden beneath their carefully maintained records? The envoy gave no further speech, no explanation. They only repeated, once more, slowly and deliberately, "We are humanity." With each syllable, the word branded itself deeper into the collective mind of the chamber. There was no anger in the delivery, only inevitability, as though they were not announcing an arrival but reminding the galaxy of something it should never have forgotten. By the time silence returned, it was no longer the silence of formality but of dread. The Council, for all its power and arrogance, found itself staring at a single truth: the forgotten name had returned, carried by a people who had survived everything thrown against them. And in that truth lay the seed of terror, for if humanity could erase extinction, then nothing could prevent them from reshaping the order of the stars once more. Whispers moved like a storm through the tiers as archivists and historians struggled to explain why the sound of that name cut so deeply. Access requests surged through secure channels, pulling fragments of records long buried under layers of redaction. The first confirmations arrived almost immediately, fragments of shattered stone inscribed with marks eerily similar to the word now spoken in the chamber. Worlds scarred by firestorms bore testimony to wars in which no one survived but the memory of a relentless enemy. Whole star systems had been abandoned, not for resource collapse or cosmic disaster, but from terror that drove civilizations to flee. The data formed a pattern, and the delegates could no longer ignore the thread binding it all together. Humanity was not new. Humanity was the ghost in their history. The realization spread with chilling speed. Races that prided themselves on their longevity admitted quiet recollections passed down as legend: hunters who never yielded, fighters who returned from ruin stronger than before, enemies who embraced pain as fuel rather than weakness. For species that had always seen themselves as predators, the recognition struck hardest. Instinct told them they were not the apex after all. A word buried in myth had risen and stripped them of that illusion. Creatures built for the hunt shifted uneasily, sensing in the cadence of humanity a predator unlike themselves, not driven by hunger, but by something more dangerous: the refusal to end. Mechanical beings who considered themselves impervious to fear confronted corrupted archives hidden in their own code. Faint echoes of long-lost battles flickered in suppressed memory banks, battles fought against organic berserkers who defied probability, who shattered predictive models and survived assaults no system calculated as survivable. Machines processed the human name as anomaly and error, yet could not purge the instinctive response. Their logic trees warned of a variable that history had once excised, only for it to return uninvited. The envoy did not elaborate, but their silence carried its own sharpness. The message was not explanation but confrontation. The weight of the name was proof enough. Delegates felt it not as rhetoric but as recognition, like prey recalling the shape of a long-forgotten predator's shadow. Attempts to dismiss the connection with ridicule died quickly, smothered by the shared unease pressing down upon every mind present. Elders of species who had ruled for epochs spoke reluctantly of directives issued in forgotten ages. Directives to erase references, to censor records, to rewrite collective memory so that future generations would never know the truth. Humanity had not been erased by chance. They had been deliberately buried, not because they were weak, but because they were too strong. The very effort to obliterate them was silent confirmation of their threat. Now, the resurgence of their name mocked those ancient attempts. All that labor to erase was undone in an instant, with a single declaration that could not be ignored. The envoy's words pressed further into the chamber. "We are the same. We are the descendants you tried to erase. Still we stand." No thunder followed, no grand performance, only calm certainty. That steadiness unsettled the room more than rage could have. Here was no wild menace, but controlled resilience, a force that had endured millennia of suppression only to return unbroken. Fear deepened because the council knew this was not bluster. The human envoy radiated assurance that their species had already proven everything required. Survival itself was their weapon, and history, long denied, was their witness. Some delegates tried to argue for context, urging restraint until research confirmed the connections. Yet even these attempts carried no strength, for the evidence was already plain. The unease was universal, and no species wished to be the first to deny it. Silence pressed harder than any ruling, for silence meant consent to the truth revealed. The chamber had seen wars, threats, and crises before, but never had it faced the return of something believed impossible. Humanity's name was no empty claim. It was an indictment of the galaxy's arrogance, a reminder that the past was never truly buried. The predator they had conspired to erase had endured in shadows and now stepped once more into the light. And in that revelation, terror spread, not because of what humans had done, but because every delegate knew instinctively what they could do again. Debate ignited the chamber with a force more chaotic than any storm. The name had broken the balance, and now factions clawed for a path forward. Some voices rose sharp with panic, demanding immediate eradication. They argued that if humanity was truly the predator from forgotten ages, delay would only doom them all. The memory of erasure's past hung heavy, and their call to action carried desperation. But others countered with grim pragmatism. Destruction had been attempted before, and if the species still stood, then proof existed that obliteration was not possible. To try again might not just fail, it could provoke a vengeance that no alliance could survive. Between these poles stood those who sought advantage. Opportunists framed humanity not as a threat to be destroyed but as a force to be courted. Better to bind them in treaty than to face them as enemies. Yet even these proposals carried unease, for alliance with predators of such depth meant accepting a role beneath them. Whispers spread that joining humanity would be survival by submission, not partnership. Pride clashed with fear, and neither yielded. Species that had always viewed themselves as apex predators struggled hardest. Their delegates spoke with clipped tones, attempting to mask the tremor in their voices. They had spent millennia secure at the top of food chains, empires built on intimidation and strength. But the word humanity had exposed the fragility of their dominance. The simple presence of Earth's envoy reminded them that the galaxy had a higher-order predator, one that did not rely on claws or toxins, but on the refusal to surrender. Instinct, honed through evolution, warned them against defiance. That warning silenced their bluster more effectively than diplomacy. Those built for prey fared no better. Panic swept across herbivorous races as their histories whispered warnings of hunters who pursued without rest. To align against humanity felt suicidal. To align with them felt like chaining themselves to a beast that could never be controlled. They trembled at the thought of standing exposed between predators old and new, but fear left them with no path that did not end in despair. Even the mechanical delegations, bound by cold logic, fractured. Probability engines calculated survival scenarios, and every outcome that placed humanity as an adversary ended in catastrophic failure. Models collapsed under the weight of unpredictability, for human variables refused containment. Their logic trees concluded what no one dared say openly: resistance was mathematically futile. Machines that had prided themselves on certainty bowed silently before the chaos of a single word. Through it all, the human envoy stood without motion, letting the council unravel itself. Their silence functioned as blade and shield, cutting through noise without effort. When finally pressed for a response, they spoke only in measured simplicity. We bleed. We endure. We remember. The words carried no ornament, no excess, only truth. And in their starkness, they struck deeper than speeches filled with threats ever could. The chamber fell quiet again, because everyone knew that what had been spoken was not a claim but a fact. The Chancellor attempted to gather order, but authority no longer belonged to the dais. The Council's hierarchy, carefully cultivated over ages, had shifted without battle. Humanity had seized dominance not by weapon or fleet but by existing as proof of survival beyond reason. Every voice that rose against them faltered before the weight of inevitability. Every plan to contain them collapsed under the shared recognition that they could not be contained. At last, the debate thinned into a single unspoken choice: to acknowledge Earth formally, or to ignite a war none believed they could win. Silence stretched, heavy with the realization that recognition was not concession but preservation. Yet beneath the silence, another truth pressed in: the moment the name had been spoken, humanity had already won. Not with fire, not with conquest, but with fear itself. The vote loomed like a shadow, each delegate weighing not only policy but survival. Formal recognition had always been ceremony, but now it carried the gravity of surrender. To deny Earth meant risking the very war their ancestors had tried and failed to erase. To accept meant inviting the predator back into the heart of the order. The chamber, built for authority, felt smaller with every passing moment, as though the name itself had bent its walls inward. One by one, voices declared their stance. Empires with long histories of conquest spoke in clipped tones, their affirmations sharp with concealed fear. They did not recognize Earth out of goodwill but because instinct left them no alternative. Smaller nations rushed to add their approval, seeking protection by proximity. Only a few resisted, their defiance brittle, their words ringing hollow. Every species present could sense the futility of denial. The momentum of inevitability pulled them all in. When the tally ended, the result was clear. Humanity was recognized, not as petitioners, not as probationary members, but as equals, granted the seat their ancestors had been denied. The Chancellor announced the outcome with mechanical precision, but even their voice carried a tremor. The Chamber's traditions, older than many stars, had been bent by a single declaration, and now the order of the galaxy itself shifted. Across the terrace, reactions rippled. Predators who had once dominated lowered their gaze, conceding ground they had never yielded before. Herbivores breathed shallowly, murmuring prayers to ancient deities for safety under this new protector or overlord. Machine species recorded the moment in faultless detail, yet their processors looped endlessly over survival models, recalibrating for a galaxy no longer their own. None admitted it openly, but all knew that the power balance had tilted, and nothing could reset it. The human envoy stood unmoved by the spectacle. No triumph flashed in their bearing, no arrogance in their words. They simply offered a final message, steady and unadorned. We ask for peace. But we do not forget our name. It was both a promise and a warning, a reminder that restraint was choice, not necessity. The statement fell over the assembly like a final seal, closing debate and sealing their place. Beyond the chamber, words spread with lightning speed. Fleets that had slept for centuries came alive as empires fortified their borders, preparing for a storm they feared but could not define. Smaller nations, sensing opportunity, sent envoys racing toward Earth, eager to stand close to power newly reborn. Even criminal syndicates whispered the name with reverence, knowing instinctively that the old laws of dominance had changed. Fear became the currency of diplomacy, and humanity minted it effortlessly. Whispers in darkened halls spoke of prophecy fulfilled, of hunters returned, of survival beyond extinction. But amid the fear was recognition of something deeper, respect. The galaxy feared humanity not because of fleets or weapons, but because the very essence of their name embodied refusal to yield. That truth demanded acknowledgement from all who heard it, even those who loathed the thought. The council adjourned, but the galaxy did not rest. Every world now measured itself against the revelation. Predators planned with caution, prey sought alliances, machines calculated probabilities that refused resolution. And through it all, one certainty echoed in every mind: humanity had not entered the galaxy, they had returned to claim what was always theirs. The envoy departed without fanfare, leaving behind only silence, but the silence was filled with recognition. The order of the stars had shifted, and it would not shift back. The galaxy moved now to a rhythm set not by ancient empires or machine logic but by the pulse of a name spoken without fear: humanity. And in that name lay the unspoken promise that if ever tested, the galaxy would learn anew what it meant to stand against them.